2 to 4 sound matrix using 1 or 2 clicks. The following chart shows the different variations of scratches that use 1 or 2 clicks that occur in 13 different open fader placeholders. Although a sample can be cut up into an infinite number of parts/placeholders, the periodic matrix of Skratches uses a 13-position system to divide a back and forth record movement into open fader or closed fader, click, possibilities. All of the Skratches in this chart only use 1 or 2 clicks to fill up 13 division points, which produces 2 to 4 sounds. It's important to note that the reference to 1 or 2 clicks used in this example is not to be confused with a 1 or 2 click flare. This chart illustrates the fact that 1 or 2 clicks can be used to create a variety of open fader and closed fader scratches such as slices, transforms, the flare, scratch, a chirp, flirps, 2 to 0 click flares and 0 to 2 click flares. So there are no full 2 click flares on this chart since they involve the use of 4 clicks in total, having 2 on the way forward and 2 on the way back. This distinction is very important since many new Scratch students sometimes miss the fact that 1 click flares actually use 2 clicks to produce 4 sounds and 2 clicks flares use 4 clicks to produce 6 sounds in total. So the term 1 click flare is historically describing the fact that there is just 1 click on the forward motion and 1 click on the backwards motion. There are a number of repeated scratches on this chart that actually follow a clear pattern as they are reflected along the diagonal axis colored in yellow highlighter. At the bottom left corner and the top right corner are both slice scratches that have clicks that occur at the 0% point, starting point, on the 100% point, end point. These two slices, as well as all of the scratches between them diagonally, have green boxes around them to denote that they are symmetric scratches. They are the only ones on the chart that have click divisions in the same place on the forward and backwards record movement. Directly at the center of this chart is Chirp scratch, which has a click that occurs at the 50% point. The yellow diagonal line that runs through it represents scratches that only have 1 click. Once again, these are not to be confused with 1 click flares, as most of these are half flares which can be called 0 to 1 click or 1 to 0 click. These half flares create 3 sounds while the rest create only 2 sounds. So the chirp at the center / this line creates only 2 sounds, as well as the scratches labeled 0,0 at the top left corner and 100 at the bottom right corner. All of the scratches that are underlined with the color create 4 sounds in total when executed by a DJ or computer. The scratches underlined in purple are full 1 click flares, while the 0 to 2 click flares are underlined in pink and the 2 to 0 click flares are underlined in orange. Notice that there are lots of 1 click flare variations that have lopsided clicks that are asymmetrical. When scratching, 1 click flares typically have a balanced set of clicks that occur at the 25% and 75% points. Yet, as we can see, these clicks that occur in other locations can have different swings that can create unique variations. The 2 scratches along the yellow diagonal line that are next to the chirp at the center of the page can also be thought of as chirp swing variations, since the click almost occurs at the 50% point. At the bottom of the page is a diagram that shows the 13 open fader placeholders of a bubby scratch versus a sample being played forward. The blue nodes / points denote the backwards movement of a vinyl or sample pullback, while the yellow nodes depict forward movement. These 13 points create a type of click octave, where the last position brings one back to the starting point after 12 click steps, in the same way that a pitch octave brings one back to the same note with 12 half steps. It's very important to note that these clicks placeholders are not scaled proportionately in the bottom chart and are distorted for educational purposes. This graph depicts them as being equally spaced apart when, in fact, there are different distances between each position's percentage. For example, the first step is 12.5% followed by 16 2/3%, which means that this third point labeled number 3 is actually closer to point number 2 distance-wise than point number 1 is to point number 2. This particular TTM 13-point placeholder system was designed to reflect the most common ways that turntablists divide scratches, which are usually numbers that are divisible by 2, 3 or 4. A more simple way to think of this is that most sample sounds are being divided into either quarter notes, eighth notes, 16th notes and triplets. At the top of the page are a non-distorted arrangement of these 13 placeholders above each scratch, with the top row representing 8th and 16th note division points, the second row representing 32nd note divisions, and the last row being triplet divisions. So in the chart at the bottom, the triplet positions of placeholders 3, 5, 9, and 11 are all skewed for learning purposes in the same way that most public transportation maps are skewed for ease of use. The placeholder numbers 1, 2, 4, 6, 7, 8, 10, 12 and 13 however are not skewed and represent the actual place where the corresponding percentages occur. The number 12 placeholder in the blue pullback example depicts the fact that these positions can be adjusted by any distance, which can be called a semi-click, or a click that occurs between the typical 13 placeholders. So in this example the click is shifted by -2/3% in the overlapping circle on the left and -1/3% on the right. This term was created based off of the existing Western music term of semitones, which are the notes in between the notes of the standard 12-step octave. Since music that incorporates semitones is called microtonal music, in the scratch world, we can thereby deem scratches with clicks that fall outside of typical placeholder positions as microclick music. Most crab scratches and 4-click flares use semi-clicks since the spacing of the clicks tend to fall outside of the norm. A 3-fingered crab, for instance, can create 3 clicks that are extremely close together and occur outside of the 13 typical click positions. The 4-click flare does this as well, since it creates a total of 5 sounds in one record movement, having clicks that would occur at about the 10%, 20%, 30% and 40% points. Additionally, Vekid's brand new 5-click flare, which creates 6 sounds in one record movement, uses a mixture of typical clicks and semi-clicks that occur at 8.33%, 16.66%, 25%, 33.33% and 41.66% points. So the first and last clicks of one movement of the scratch can be deemed semi-clicks, since they haven't been used historically, while the middle 3 are traditional. Furthermore, from these diagrams, we can see that there is really no such thing as bad scratch, since any perceived mistake or imbalance will always create undue variation or technique. So it's up to a skilled turntablist to practice controlling these different variations, as opposed to letting our brains naturally quantize our clicks into a limited amount of placeholders. It's for this reason that I always recommend to not practice transform scratches too much, since they can train your brain to only click at the 0%, 50% and 100% points. This chart shows us that when we make a mistake with an open fader scratch, it may become a type of transform. But when one reverses the scenario and does a transform scratch and makes a mistake, usually the brain will block it from becoming an open fader scratch. It's for this same reason that patting one's head and rubbing one's stomach is difficult at first, since the human brain likes to make motor movements occur in unison. So chirps, slices and transforms are biologically more intuitive to the brain than open fader techniques like flares and orbits. In my 15 years of teaching scratches, I've found it's best to teach open fader techniques from the beginning to steer the brain away from getting locked into motor intuitive automatic closed fader cuts. The more one practices any technique, the synapses in the brain create stronger pathways that can ultimately lead to reinforcing bad habits or good ones. So the phrase, "practice makes perfect," only works if the practice is correct or proper technique.